Welcome back to the Bob Harden Show. And now here's your host, Bob Harden.
Thanks so much for joining us here on the show. It's brought to you in part by Florida Weekly, your complimentary copy available at hundreds of locations throughout the Paradise Coast, as well as the Foundation for Government Accountability. Terrific organization. Visit the website, thefga.org. Coming up, we're going to visit with Larry Bell, the author of Scared Witless, The Prophets and Profits of Climate Doom. Right now we have with us Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He is the founder of the Muslim Reform Movement. He's also the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He has written a book that I've read, very transparent, wonderful book. If you really want to understand what's happening within Islam, it's A Battle for the Soul of Islam. He's also a former U.S. Navy lieutenant commander. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
Always a pleasure, Doctor. And you post on Facebook your thoughts about the speech that Donald Trump gave on his vision for foreign policy. Your comments were very, in my mind, very thoughtful and provocative. Maybe you could tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I think there's been no more important election than this one as far as resetting what America's role is in the world. And I understand where Mr. Trump's coming from. He said his policy is about America first, and he would gauge that. And I think there was some things that were refreshing to hear from him about a little more specifics about getting rid of ISIS, about engaging our allies better. But yet, the question that remains always when we elect a president is, and by the way, their foreign policy position is the most important thing that they do because they set that vision by themselves. And ultimately, what is the doctrine? What is a Trump doctrine? Mm-hmm. And I couldn't really make heads or tails of what that was. On the one hand, he continued to be positive about Russia, even though Russia's role in Syria has been genocidal. There was no mention of Assad at all, and you can't get rid of ISIS without getting rid of Assad. And how we can navigate a era or years in his administration with no ISIS without also seeing Assad leave is beyond me. I was a little disappointed in that I didn't hear him use the term Islamism or a doctrine that would fight for the advancement of liberty. It almost seemed as we would continue more of Obama's policies, which is America would withdraw from the world. I read something in the National Review where they said it was sort of like Rand Paul on napalm, which is, you would get rid of ISIS, but that's about it, and then we withdraw from the world. So, I'm one of those, as you've known for a long time, that I think in the world where there's vacuums, they get filled by evil, by Russia, by Iran. And while I was, a bit happy to hear him say that the Iran deal was a mess and he would throw that away, that was a positive sign. But at the end of the day, the Arab awakening was something I didn't hear him talk about, and the Arab awakening changed the entire game. He was still using his talking point of condemning our involvement in Iraq as being problematic and talking about us withdrawing militarily. And I don't think you can legitimately criticize our presence in Iraq without putting it in the context of the Arab awakening. And Bob, Iraq would be Syria 1,000 times worse today if Saddam Hussein had been present, because you have to put it in the context of the Arab awakening, and he really didn't do that.
Yeah, so, we call it the Arab Spring right now, but looking back on this, and you'd mentioned that the void always seems to be filled by evil. This whole Arab Spring has turned out to be really just creating chaos in the Middle East.
Well, there's no doubt, and I think you're treating a cancer of two heads of a snake or two sides of the same coin, which is fascism. And the old 20th century paradigm needs to be thrown away. The 20th century paradigm was always to pick the lesser of two evils, even though those cauldrons that were brewing radical Islam, like the monarchy of Saudi Arabia, brewing Wahhabism, the Egyptian Brotherhood being brewed by the military dictatorship. Al-Sisi was heralded as he was going to come in and be a big reformer. And yet the people spoke not only against the Mubarak regime, which is Al-Sisi, same thing, and but they also spoke vociferously against the Brotherhood and against theocracy. So bottom line is the Egyptian people were looking for a third path. Tunisia showed that they could do a third path, and Tunisia is not a mess, is not chaos. They had a democratic election in which December 31st, 2014, in which they ousted the Ennahda, the Islamist the Brotherhood type party, and put in a secular liberal party. So I think it can work when you have the civil society groups growing. And by the way, Mr. Trump's main policy advisor, Waleed Ferris, agrees completely. His book, The Future Jihad, and others talks about the need to displace Islamist movements with liberal civil society movements. But I didn't see too much of Mr. Ferris's fingerprints on Trump's speech. He did mention the Brotherhood, which I think was some of probably the input of Waleed. But I didn't see enough of a doctrine of the advancement of liberty, because you can't just say you're against terrorism and say that our allies are going to get rid of it, because they don't want liberty movements and real democracy to come up. Those monarchs and dictators are truly, at the end of the day, not our allies.
Right, a great point, Doctor. So I think what you're saying is you'd like a stake in the ground with regard to still being, the city on the hill, or the shining light, the whole notion that we are defending liberty and we're proud of it, and that people who threaten liberty are going to have a problem with the United States.
Amen. I think, history has shown Natan Sharansky knew when he was in a Soviet prison that he was going to get out when he heard President Reagan call them the evil empire. And America's role is to advocate not only for democracy at home, but for people to see us around the world, not be hypocritical about it, that we be on the right side of history. And eventually those governments are going to go. If it's not in the next few years, it'll be in the next generation. And when they do, they're going to look upon American presidents and our foreign policy as either helpful in that or hypocritical. And I think if we continue to aid just because of our concern about gas prices or because of our short-term concern about fighting Al-Qaeda and ISIS, those are symptoms. We're not going to see those symptoms go away unless we start to work with truly our allies who are in the prisons of Saudi Arabia and the prisons of Egypt and elsewhere that truly share our values on the ground. And I hope Mr. Trump can step away from things that really scared me when he mentioned Tiananmen Square as a riot, or talked about the strength of the Chinese or of Putin, who is his friend. Those are not our allies. Our allies are the people in the prisons of these countries.
Yeah. Doctor, my feeling is, and it looks like Donald Trump is going to be our next president. God help us if there's an alternative to that. But what we need is people like you and others to have his ear and to provide counsel. Hopefully he'll surround himself with the right people. You suggested he already has with one person you mentioned. So my hope is that as he takes on this responsibility, he gets good counsel from people like you, Doctor. Before I let you go, I'd like to get your comments. There's breaking news this week about contributions from Qatar and Saudi Arabia into the Clinton Foundation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, Richard Pollack at the Daily Caller, I'd ask people to look at that when they say, well, it was just a few donations here and there into the Clinton Global Initiative. He traced for the last 10 years $100 million, and it included a sovereign wealth fund with a couple partners that Clinton had worked with, and he personally took in 10 to 15 million. So, when people, this is not just foreign agency, which should already be a concern,
right,
but when people see where are the voices of moderate Islam, go to the Clinton Global Initiative and look if they did any work in the Middle East regarding women's rights, regarding reform, regarding countering Islamism, and that money buys silence. If you look, the Senate just passed a law basically giving the families of 9/11 the right to sue the Saudis. The Saudi PR machine, which had hired, by the way, this is bipartisan, that hired not only Democrats and gave money to Clintons, but also to Haley Barbour and other lobbyists, often conservatives. They buy silence. They buy a blind eye, if you will, to the travesties done in the name of Sharia and Islam in those countries. And they tried to stop this legislation from passing, and it didn't work. It passed the Senate 99-0, and now it's going to the House. The president said he'll veto it. But this is an example of, Americans need to wake up and see what's happening in the name of our country because of the strength of these foreign lobbies. And we're told that that's the only option we have, when in fact we do have an option, which is to stand for the values that we represent in the U.S. And this money should awaken people to the fact that they're buying blasphemy laws in America, which is silence against the threat of political Islam.
Yeah. I want to encourage our listeners to go to your website, AIF Democracy. That stands for American Islamic Forum for Democracy, AIFdemocracy.org. Also, A Battle for the Soul of Islam. I've read the book. It is very revealing and very helpful in understanding the battle for the soul of Islam, and I encourage you to get a copy and read it. Always appreciate your commentary, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Thanks, as always, for having me, Bob. Appreciate
My pleasure. Thank you, Doctor. I've known Dr. Zuhdi Jasser now for, well, at least 10 years, and he lives under a lot of threats. Believe me, the Muslim Brotherhood does not like his message. He stands for the separation of mosque and state. A Battle for the Soul of Islam. Great read.